Thank you for joining me. This project talks about the school to prison pipeline and how it affects many young individuals. And the purpose of this is to inform people of, the effects it's causing on our youth, and really encourage others to take a stand on this and advocate for youth, because they sometimes they have no one advocating for them, and the effects can affect them long term. um, we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about you, your background, your family, and anything you would like to share with us.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for opening it up that way, and thank you for letting me being part of your project and this questionnaire. I know it's very important when we talk about school resource officers, the school to prison pipeline. So a little bit about me. My name is Airam Coronado Gomez. Airam, it's okay. I am a mother of a 3-year-old. His name is Aslan Jacob Coronado. I was born in San Luis Colorado, Sonora, Mexico, but I was raised in Salinas pretty much all my life. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Growing up, I entered the growing up in Salinas, I witnessed a lot of community violence. I was raised by a single mother who worked in the fields, so we know the struggle of that. They wake up early in the morning and they come home really late and really tired. Unfortunately, we live in Monterey County where the rent's super high. So she had to work what she had to work just to put a little roof over my head and have food on our table. So growing up in Salinas, I witnessed a lot of community violence, and throughout I went through a lot of different traumas. And eventually I ended up getting pushed out of school and ended up in the juvenile justice system, introduced to the juvenile justice system that led me to enter the incarceration and also the foster care system. But now, I'm going to Harnell College. I work for MILPA, an organization that does a lot of local policy advocacy. I focus on doing a lot of local policy advocacy, but we focus on ending mass incarceration, dismantle the school to prison pipeline, and build community people power. So that's just a little bit about me. That's what I'm doing right now. So yeah.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure just being a part of this, and I think it's information that needs to get out there. Folks just need to know about this more, especially the parents. I guess my first and foremost, my full name is Edgar Ibarra Gutierrez. My gender pronouns are he, him, his. I grew up in the city of Watsonville since I was a kid, a little agricultural town right there in the Central Coast, in between Salinas and Santa Cruz. Notoriously known for its strawberries, but also was at one point like the apple capital of the world, Martinelli's and all that type of stuff, right? I grew up there with my brother and my 2 sisters. I'm the youngest of 4. My mother being a single parent, trabajando en like working the canneries or the fields, La Mora, the strawberry, or wherever job was, right? And knowing that she was an undocumented woman with 4 kids, it was hard. But yeah, and like I said, grew up in Watsonville, bounced back and forth. As I always reflect, like I damn near attended almost all the schools there, almost. And it's just like we didn't have we had housing instability. We were like, my mom was a single parent. Everybody knows that rent in the Central Coast is, even back in the day in the 90s, and it was super expensive. And so it's kind of crazy just thinking about like how many schools I was able to go, but out of like that whole tumultuous time of just being able to bounce back and forth from place to place, I created like this unique ability just to make friends with anybody, like just be very social, and just like right away I can go to a school. I was able to go to a school and just kick off, make friends everywhere. And so as I got older, I was able to like go to different parts of the town, be acquainted with the town, like where I was at, the streets, all that. And so that kind of really helped. But it was I remember, like, again, I'll say, like, housing insecurity is real, poverty was real, all that type of stuff, and but before I get into that, let me go a little bit back. My family's roots, my mom viene de Mexicali, but her family also comes from My mom's family viene de Sonora, Pueblo Yaqui, Sonora, Pueblo Vicum, uh, in Sonora. Also from her mom's side, vienen de Durango, de Chihuahua. It's like a whole mixture of places from the northern. They're like a very migratory family as far as like just following the work, you know. And fortunately for my grandmother, you know, my grandmother Juana Galvan Sanchez, she was able to settle down in Mexicali alongside my grandfather Ramon Gutierrez, uh, due to my grandfather's working in the ferrocarril, in the railroad system. Uh, so that they were able to establish themselves, you know, and she was the first out of her whole family to have a house, to have an actual stable house and not be bouncing from place to place. It was my grandmother, and it was a shanty little box, you know. It was shanty, and so just that's where my mother comes from that type of heritage. You know, they said my mom's grandfather was orphaned during the revolution. Both sides of the family were impacted during the Mexican Revolution, and that trauma, you know, that came with the revolution was passed down intergenerationally, you know, all the way down to my mother, and even potentially to me as well. I just haven't figured that out how it has, right? But my dad's side of the family vienen de Jalisco, San Juan de los Lagos, and Lagos de Moreno. Um, no, they grew up there, you know, in the Rancho La Matagorda, you know, doing that, you know, working the rancho. And my mom, my dad met in Watsonville in the strawberry fields back in the day when my mom had just first came from Mexico to visit my tia. And, you know, it's just crazy because one time I found this letter going like through all the family pictures. I found like a letter of my dad trying to throw game on my mom and stuff. It was funny, and I busted it out. My mom's like, "Give me my stuff back," right? Anyways, side note. But regardless of the fact, just wanted to share that much because that's where I come from, and those are my two sides of my family, my lineage, or where I go back to Mexico, and the importance of being aware of like my own cultural roots. I've been able to dig more with my grandmother's family, understand like where we come from, our indigenous heritage on that side of the family. My dad's side is just again, it's very from Jalisco, and then our grandparents, they lost a lot of information due to some fires back in the day in the house, in the old houses. But I think it's always good to uplift. I just again want to bring both of my side of my family, and said raised in Watsonville, and you know, unfortunately for myself, I entered the juvenile justice system. I think it was at either 12 or 13, not quite sure. I would have to go through all my paperwork, but I got placed on probation first for like a freaking dagger, like having a knife on me. I got arrested, went to juvenile hall, and got placed on that. And, you know, and after that, I never got off. Last year, 2020, I got off parole. It was my first time since I was 12 or 13 to be fully out of the system, quote unquote. I voted for the first time. I was able to travel without having to ask anyone for permission, having to call and go get a paper that I can actually travel. You know, I'm a current UC Davis student. I'm on my senior year. I should be graduating this coming summer or spring, however that works here. So, you know, since I've been back from incarceration, I'm almost doing from 14 to 24, almost close to 10 years. Just being back in our at home, it's been a process, you know, having my mom and my, you know, rekindling that relationship with my family members, of understanding that like, shit, I'm no longer that 14-year-old boy that left, came back like a 24-year-old young man with arrested development, shit, trying to figure out how to decarcerate my mind, body, and soul. And but it's like, again, it's an ongoing effort to one, continue to reclaim myself, my own personal self, to reclaim my indigenous heritage, cultural traditions, and to rekindle those and rebuild those relationships with my family and help out the community. So I'll just say that much for myself right now before I go on a good one.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Lydia, for this opportunity. My first and full name is Alexis Magdaleno Mora. My family comes from the southern end of Guanajuato, which is in Chupicuaro and Acámbaro, Guanajuato. I'm currently 28 years old, and I grew up, came over here to the United States when I was about 5. I was born in Mexico, and I came over here at the age of 5, and we ended up in Soledad, which is where I grew up, and where I got a chance to, you know, meet my wife, my partner, and we've been married for about 4 years, 3 years now, and she's my high school sweetheart. So that's a little bit about myself. I have a small dog. We recently moved out, and it just been growing and moving on to a new stage of my life in adulthood, right? And so I was very fortunate enough to go to school after high school and go to community college in Salinas at Hartnell, and then transferred to UC Berkeley, where I studied social work. I came in as a political science major, but quickly realized that it was not something that I liked. And I ended up switching my major to something that was more suitable to what I wanted to do in my community, which was, bring back tangible skills that I can support young people or support my community, which I ended up finding in social work, and met some really good professors out there, um, that supported me throughout my journey in my career, and got politicized, and also got kind of aware of what the school to prison pipeline was while I was at Berkeley. It wasn't something that I was necessarily knowledgeable of, at least well read upon as I am now. So that's kind of where I got a lot of my politicization. And then coming back home, I knew that it would be something that would be important for me to take those resources that I got from Berkeley and bring them back home to my community, so that they can also reap the benefits of my journey, my migration over there. So I came back home and started working with MILPA back in 2017. So I've been here for about 4 years.
Okay, great. Yes. So, hello, my name is Desiree Rosas. I'm the program and leadership assistant here at MILPA. My pronouns are she, her. A little bit about myself. I am a formerly incarcerated person, system impacted person. I grew up in the foster care system and eventually ended up in other systems as well as an adult. Yeah, I grew up in a single parent home. My mother somewhat raised me for a part of my life. Yeah, but that's a little bit of like background about myself.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, gracias. Gracias, Lydia, and I appreciate making the time and having me, talk a little bit about my story, right? So my full name is Bernard Gomez. Pronouns is he, his, él, yo, bro, carnal, anything cool like that. I go by Bernie for short. Family background. On my mother's side, her name is Maria Estela Gomez. Her maiden name is Martel Flores. She comes from Zacatecas, the Los Aguajes, Tlantenango area, which is a Chichimeca descent, predominantly Cascana tribe. They're in that local area there. On my father's side, his name is Jorge Arturo Gomez. Originally Jorge Arturo de Alba, long story. And he was born in Hermosillo, but the lineage from on his side is from the Opata tribe. Still trying to figure that one out, see where they're at, but it's a Colteca nation also. So that's my little bit of background in regards to my lineage. But I was born and raised in Watsonville, California. It's just a beautiful, agricultural Central Coast part of the salad bowl, right? The agricultural capital of the world, right? We have the strawberries, the best strawberries at that, just so you know. But a few things about myself. Yeah, I mean, just I'm a father, right? I'm a father of two beautiful daughters. Building that relationship with them, right? It's kind of crazy for me to say that the oldest one is 21 and the youngest is 18. So it's like, wow, no se fue el tiempo, but I'm in the process of rebuilding and mending that relationship with them, and everything's going great, and after all these years, I think I've I'm in a better place and in a good place, in the right place, right, to do that for them, with them, and for us. Um, Also, I like to build lowriders and hot rods and stuff. And I've been doing that since I was a kid, so I'm really good at going with vehicles. So if you ever get into hopefully you don't get no car accidents, but if you need a car fix, hey, hit me up. Or if you had like a car you want to, restore, I'm the dude.
A lot of people don't know what the school to prison pipeline is. Um, and to those that are unaware, how would you describe it to them, or, to your parents?
The whole like basic, my basic analysis of the school to prison pipeline is really the over policing and the zero tolerance policies that the system has created within communities of color that are under resourced and underserved, and also within the schools, the school climate and environment, right? That is also under funded and under resourced también. Understanding that growing up with the lack of support, whether it's economic, emotional or mental, um, we kids are gonna behave a certain way when entering school and being in class. For one, we're growing up, we're going through our own identity, our own belonging, searching for belonging, identity. We might come from rough homes or rough communities, and the lack of support, understanding, and care by a system uh, will by a system that should be able to help us, right, to navigate life and our education, is really just willing to throw us away, to use punitive measures, just because of the skin of our the color of our skin. Now we see data now that states that kids of color are predominantly targeted by uh, those zero tolerance policies that really don't have the compassion for our behaviors, for kids, and the school is not willing to intervene or approach the student with again within a compassionate lens, through a compassionate lens. So just decides to, like, the teacher decides to, like, what, I don't want to deal with this kid because he's being disruptive to the other 20, 30 kids, right? And so nos manda al principal. The principal has, he don't want to deal with this, so he suspends us, right? In suspension. Therefore, now we're suspended at home. For one, we're probably in trouble with our parents, grounded or something, or our parents are working and they can't really supervise us, so they leave us at home, maybe, just because of necessity, maybe a babysitter if we're fortunate enough. But I think that the unintended consequence of that is that we miss out in school. We fall behind in our studies, and now it creates a dysfunction between the teacher and the student, or the student with his peers. Next thing you know, kids are seeing the student as a troublemaker, and we start treating being treated a certain way, and eventually maybe even internalizes that the fact that, oh, I'm a troublemaker, so I'm gonna be a troublemaker, or I'm not worthy of compassion, love, or understanding from my teachers and my peers, so I'm gonna act out and be, and it kind of boils up that rage. Well, anyway, so it's a cycle of systems of the system handing off that individual to another system. So like I mentioned, it's from the teacher, right? It's a little satellite, for the school. It's the classroom, and then the principal, suspensions, right? And then from suspensions to the house. And eventually, also we run the risk of coming in contact with law enforcement, for maybe being out, not being in school, so it just it's the lack of support and willingness from the school administration and staff to support, and rather get rid of the kid and expose them to the climate of the community, right? Whether it's checked or unchecked. And next thing you know, once you come in contact with police, right, it's kind of hard to like get them off your back, you know. And next thing you know, you find yourself in probation or in the juvenile system or even the foster care system, or even before the foster care with CPS gets involved, and it becomes a whole, you're involved in the whole system. But also understanding that now that the element of cops inside the schools, it eliminates a lot of that handoff from the teacher to the principal to the parents, and now the police actually gets direct involvement from the teacher to the police, and usually it's not teacher, police, parent. It's actually teacher, police, juvenile hall, and then the parent has to go and pick you up at juvenile hall, and next thing you know, you're in the system. And with all this, it's like it's creating, loss of education time and creating some internalized problems también, and let alone, family problems. It's like the parents, our parents also go through their own emotions, whether it's shame, rage, disappointment or confusion, or whatever it is. But it really creates a discrepancy towards the kids' just natural habitat of like growing up.
The school to prison pipeline is something that we know that exists, but we've never had a name for it. Growing up, I definitely saw it. I definitely felt it. I knew it was something that was wrong, where they would punish us, especially the young man, for minor behavior or harass us, and eventually, set us up for failure through behavior contracts, through dress code violations, through all these minor, small punishments that eventually stressed you out to eventually kick you out, and push you out of school, and put you on probation. And so the way I would describe it to them is a set of policies, practices, and attitudes towards young people, specifically young people of color in low-income communities, that essentially set us up for failure, take us away from the resources that we need to be successful, whether it be job training, mentorship, college readiness, different programs, social emotional support, and instead use punishment such as suspensions, expulsions, behavior contracts, and really schools like this take away many of the valuable resources that support young people, and the only alternative that parents see, or that they offer to parents, is probation. Probation, call the police if your child is acting up, and those type of attitudes and behaviors is what leads to the school to prison pipeline. So that's the best way I could describe it. But in a nutshell, it's setting up our young people for failure, as opposed to addressing the root causes of the things that they're struggling with, right? From poverty to racism to hunger to homelessness to all those things. It's mental health.
Is there anything else, you would like to share how it was for your family and you growing up? Were there any struggles or anything you would like to share with us?
I always think of like what that impacted, how that impacted me, right? And knowing that on my mom's side of the family, it's a bunch of single ladies with a lot of kids. And not to stereotype Mexicanos, but that's the reality for me and my family, right? My primos, primas, we all grew up without fathers. And majority of us grew up without fathers. And if they were around, they were still absent because of alcoholism, drug abuse, and shit like that. And our uncles and older cousins, they were all lost to heroin. Or freaking, they were just out and about running amok. And so I bring all that into play because in the late 80s, early 90s, Watsonville was like a hotbed for violence. There was a lot of things taking place. My mom, my grandmother took part in those cannery strikes. Probably not in the front, like the main people, but they were participants. always in the cannery strikes somehow, some way. And so we had some, like, I remember my mom used to always tell us, like, when we're out there running amok, like, you guys got to figure this out. Like, you guys got to fight for something that's legit. And she'd always like jam us all up while she gave everybody some food, all the bros, right? I used to be running amok, and I was, like I said, 13, 14, not really caring about much, just trying to go through the motions. But it was hard on us, like I said, poverty and just housing instability was real. I think I was I will say 8th grade, right before I locked up, turned 14. We finally got Section 8 and we were able to get like our own home officially, because before then it was nothing but either like a studio or a room. And a lot of the studios or rooms that we lived in were like for single dudes. There's like these buildings where it's just only single dudes and migrant workers, and in some of these buildings that we lived in, the reality was prostitution, violence, drug abuse, everything was there, literally. And me and my cousins, everybody, we grew up in that area, we grew up in that place. And and as a kid, you don't really think about all that, but it was hard. As a kid, I didn't really understand. And I think this offers perspective for me, that as a kid, I was the youngest out of 4. I didn't really understand, but my older brother, my older sister, the ones who were middle school, high school, had a little bit more, they had their perspective going on, were able to understand things for what it were. I've talked to them and they said, man, it was fucking hard. It was like having to go from school to school, having to, like, my brother was one of the smartest kids. Before he graduated, he was out of like 100 kids, and like, he tested on the top 50 for the state test que siempre daban, and they wanted him to do all these things, but we didn't have money, and he has to stay back, So, like, all those things, I again, it all leads up to the school to prison pipeline, and it ties into that because it's like this whole component of poverty. Like, there's these policies and procedures and laws in place that impact us negatively, but that's only within the school system. There's also laws and stuff that are targeting Black and brown people within the community outside of the school setting. And for us, it was just like, shit, we didn't have no pathways to higher economic status. It was my mom on her own, and we grew up in not the best quote unquote spaces. However, in those spaces, there was a bunch of love and community there. It's just that everybody was dealing with the violence that everybody was like leaving either Mexico. Everybody had their traumas, their intergenerational traumas, and it manifested in many different ways. And I got to see that, and again, having conversations with my mom, just, and my older brother, my older sister, about just everything that took place, is just what's important. How we grew up in Watsonville, and what we continue to see, that there continues to be this, si no fueron ellos, fuimos nosotros. So they get all assimilated and acculturated into this freaking way of being that it really makes you forget about your cultural roots, your history, your tradition, all that. So I'll say that much for all that.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we were born in Mexico, but we came over here to a small town called Soledad. Soledad is home to 2 prisons, Salinas Valley and Soledad State Prison. And so we have that economy there, but we don't reap the benefits of it. But we ended up in Soledad because of my grandpa. My grandpa, Papa Castro, was a bracero. He came over here, looking for employment, temporary employment, and throughout many summers and springs and falls, my grandpa would come over here, bring the whole entire family. Back when, before, going back and forth was illegal. Mm-hmm. In the terms of America, United States, right? United States policies. But we eventually ended up here. And, because of the Bracero program, because of coming to work in the fields, my mom was the youngest of 12 kids on my mom's side. And so, she didn't have to work in the fields. as an adult, right? A lot of my uncles and aunts, they all did, but my mom didn't have to, just because she was given a slightly little bit more opportunity to go to school and to have, that all that they had, my family had built up for. And so she was able to reap the benefits. And um, my dad was a mechanic. He's still a mechanic, and so he spent a lot of time away. He was self-employed, so he had to provide for the entire family, and that meant putting in a lot of hours, working at 8, getting out at 8, Monday through Sunday. And so we spent a lot of time by ourselves. My mom worked at Order Express, cashing checks and all that stuff, sending money to Mexico. And so, for a lot of summers, if we weren't in school, we would spend a lot of time on our own. And so that led to me and my brother just kind of, trying to learn, trying to figure out things on our own, navigate America on our own, navigate, poverty on our own. And so, we made some mistakes along the way, and it was difficult for us just, not having that direct guidance on a daily. And so we kind of just had to figure it out on our own. And yeah, that was kind of my upbringing. I always like to say the city of Soledad has a curse, that we're cursed with solitude, which is what Soledad means, right? And that started really a long time ago with the mission system, separating families, separating Native children from their communities, isolating them, and then to now where we have the prison system, where we're keeping thousands of men away from their families, keeping them isolated. And now we have, farm workers coming over here to work, quite frankly, very difficult jobs,
Right.
very demanding jobs, where a lot of times kids have to raise themselves. Kids have to do that thing that we call adultification. And so they have to kind of learn how to cook, look out, pick up their little brothers and sisters from schools. And so that was my experience, having to mature a little bit younger than I was supposed to, right? So that was my experience growing up in Soledad. And yeah, that's a little bit about what my upbringing was like.
Did you or your family receive any services that were accessible to you guys in the community?
No, to be honest, my mom never got food stamps. She never got housing. She never got counseling. The only thing we had was that they did provide to me was therapy. And that was very limited, right? And she'll have to stop working just to take me. So she'll miss a couple of hours of work or a day of work, just to take me. But other than that, we didn't have any other services or something that you say like, oh, we're going to support single mothers, field workers, not as much as there is some now, but it's still very limited to the people that can get those services, right? So honestly, there wasn't any other services. There wasn't any mental health support. There wasn't any like, hey, I'm going to help you out with rent. We're going to, gift you food. We're going to provide you with helping support you paying your bills. We're gonna provide you with like free sports, a free pass to take your child out of Salinas. I never went to Fort Ord till the age of 16. I didn't know that part existed. I've only went to Toro Park childhood one or twice, and it's here in the city limits. Well, kind of around the city limits. So it's to the crème. I only went through the crème due to school. My mom didn't have she didn't, get her driver license till later. So there wasn't the proper services, not the services that we needed, not support to what my mother was going through. So, even when I was going through my stage of I'm not going to say rebellion, but like a stage of me just being a teenager. My mom did advocate she talked to the principal, hey, my daughter needs therapy. She needs counseling. She needs help. And the principal, I remember my freshman year in high school, I remember his name too. I'm not gonna expose him. I seen him yesterday at the Salinas Senior High School District meeting. And he's like, well, ma'am, we don't have any of that. All we can do is send her to the portables, which is only 3 hours of school, right? And mom was like, but that's not what I'm asking. So, well, that we don't have any of that, señora. You know, all we can do is send her to the portables because we don't want her around with the other youth. So that's what they did, and I was pushed out of school that way. So, you know, my mom was always trying to be a person that could advocate for other people and definitely advocates for herself, specifically for her children, you know, and there wasn't any services like that.
My mom being a single parent with 4 kids, she did get welfare and all that stuff. And if it wasn't for that, like, honestly, we would be really on the streets. We would have been like, it would have been bad, you know? But again, a lot that having the help from welfare and having my mom been able to, like, somehow, some way, and I think she really relied on it when we were all, like, me and my mother's sister were the youngest, when estamos chiquitos, that we weren't yet in school and stuff like that. I think she relied on that the most at the time. But once we got older and then we started going to school, my older sister, my older brother could really take care of us. She started, like, kind of dejando todo eso, because it's like, it's hard, and it's like, si estás trabajando, you have to report, and it gets all kind of crazy, right? So she was working, at one time, she was working 2 jobs, wouldn't get home till like freaking 8 or 9 in la noche. My bro and my older sister would take care of us, and, you know, it was always hard, like, so services, there's church-based services, that Salvation Army, like, for us, we all signed up for presents in the Salvation Army, or go and take part of, like, the Thanksgiving or their Navidad dinners. We also, like, my father was in prison. He would sign up for, like, for presents. They would drop presents to us in Christmas time. Sí habían servicios, but again, my mom being undocumented, she didn't have access to many of them. So yeah, like, and for us, we were all, like, you know, we were kind of migrant, and she worked as a campesina for some time. So we all cualificábamos for, like, the free lunch program and stuff like that. But honestly, like, even like as I started getting older, like, all of my cousins, we always ran, like, in a little pack. Éramos primos y primas, brother, like, you know, and siempre andábamos todos, right, or with our friends, como sea la cosa. But like, you know, it was unfortunate. Some of us started hanging out, or we were known, like, some of our family members were known to be associated with certain folks, and that puts, like, a negative image on you. And these youth centers, they had a very strict anti-gang policy, or so if you were associated or you knew, you couldn't come into these youth centers. So, you know, for me and my family, we were like, a lot of us, like, automatically at one point or another, bam, we can no longer go there because we're associated with these folks. So that really puts us in a situation. And while at school, and we didn't have no programs, like mentor programs or anything like that. Like, man, there was nobody there. If the only mentorship that I can say on this guy, I got it from some of the guys on the streets running amok, who'd always tell me when I would be out and about trying to ditch, trying to, like, getting in trouble or just up to no good, go back to school. What are you doing here? I'm gonna tell your mom, you know, or someone in the street, Doña Juana, or one of the doñas down in the neighborhood. They were the ones who at one time or another would drop some gems. They would drop gain some wisdom on us, and we were just too dumb and young and to realize what was being put in front of us. But services, again, like, we there was stuff there, but not necessarily what for us, like, specifically for myself, being a young man, having his father incarcerated, not really having a male role model in my life. So I try to figure it out everywhere else. I try to piece it together. Kind of like al estilo Inspector Gadget. We have a little bit of everything and make this ideal man, right? And it wasn't the best. It was really grounded and based on what I saw growing up and what I thought it was meant to be. And then there was always that notion of, like, you know, I don't know, from me personally, I was always told that I looked just like my father. So I automatically associated, well, if I look just like him, I need to follow in his footsteps and go to prison too. That was just my crazy rationale as a kid. And So when we talk about services, like, man, we needed a lot of social, emotional services. And not just like, I know we'll hear that a lot. It's like we needed culturally relevant folks that look like us, that come from experiences like us, um, that could help us out to relate with, something that was community driven, community led. We needed that. And a lot of those community led and community driven approaches are not usually funded. And that's what we could have related to. That's what my mom could have felt comfortable. Like, come on, una señora going through having to navigate with 4 kids, with their mom, with their husband or partner locked up, and la vergüenza que viene, the shame, the vergüenza, and even like the pride, like that, all those things, like, so it's hard for them to just confide with any random ass white person. And so yeah, like I said, like we needed a lot of social, emotional, and we needed opportunity to understand what investing in finances meant. My mom didn't freaking learn about credit cards or anything like that till I think until like after 2010, because my mom was also put in a place where they tried to deport her. She was in a detention facility for some time, and she experienced incarceration to an extent as well, and she had to go through the whole immigration process. So I kind of woke her game up too, and that's when I was incarcerated. And so I guess I'll say that it's like we needed services that reflected our community, that were community led, community supported, fully funded, a program for young men and young women that explain what higher education was, how to actually go into higher education. My sister went into higher education and she had no one there to her. I myself, I'm going through, and I have some help from folks that I know in the relations I've built, but that continues to be an issue. So we needed that. We also needed to have robust, like, after school programs, like I don't unnecessarily not probably just because I didn't allow myself to hear it, but it's like I've never remember seeing no arts, no music, sports. Don't even think about it. We apenas tenemos para la comida. Y quieres sports, ve juega fuera, right? So I think, again, just going back, culturally relevant, healing-centered services, like all these little like catchphrases that we hear is real. Like our community needed healing then. Still do to this day, and I think that's some stuff that we need to continue to uplift. Say that much.
Is there anything you would like to add as to how you were affected by the school to prison pipeline? Anything that affected you with your mental health, your physical health, emotionally, or how your family was affected by it?
Yeah, so the way that I was pushed out of school was that, that summer before entering high school, I went through this traumatic experience, and it was something that nobody seen coming, of course, or else you could have obviously prevented it. But being pushed out of school made me, in a way, hate school, right? And made me hold this resentment of like, well, I don't belong here. They don't even want me here. What am I doing here? They just judge me based on what I'm going through. Everybody knows what I'm going through. Nobody's offering me anything or help, or, hey, how's your day going? Or how can I support you? Or, hey, Airam, here, let's take you here, or let's talk about what's going on. They didn't do any of that other than just suspend me. So when they did that, and I take full accountability of what I did. I was an angry teenager. I was trying to figure out why things happened. Very depressed, very emotional. I carry my feelings in my hands. Like, don't look at me like that way, and I take full responsibility of that. It's just, if I would have had services, things could have probably been different. If I would have probably been like, hey, let's work on this instead of pushing me out of school. Because once they moved me to the portables, I went to school for 3 hours a day. And you know what I'm gonna do for the rest of the day that I'm supposed to be at school? I ended up getting arrested within less than 2 months after I was pushed out of school. I ended up getting arrested and, going to juvenile hall, and then my mom got a strike and child protective services. So I can say, and I missed all that. I missed graduating from a regular high school. I'm happy to say that I graduated early from Rancho Cielo Culinary Academy. And I'm going to college right now, you know. But I missed a lot. I missed a lot of my youthful years because all the system shows you is how to do time, prepare you for the adult system, right? How to separate you from community, and you basically learn how to do time that way. So I missed a lot of my youthful years. You know, could have things been different? Yes. And it affected my mom, as in she felt hopeless. Man, the school doesn't want her here. Where else do I put her? ¿Qué más hago? You know? And it affected her health. It affected her health to the point where la mortificación, you know, the stress, the overwhelmingness, the sadness, the like she mentioned to me once, she's like, I feel like I failed you, you know? So I was broken. She's like, and I was crying one night, and I wasn't home that day. And she ended up having like a mini stroke. And later on, they found all this health stuff on her. And right now she's struggling through high cholesterol, you know, and other stuff that she's going through that ever since she had the mini stroke. So I often feel like that was my fault for putting all that stress on her. But I was like, I wasn't thinking in a sense of like, Airam, you need help. You know, I was like, I was just mad. I was like, why did this just happen to me? Why? But why me? Like, what did I do to deserve this? And no adults, there was no counselors, there was no therapists, there was nothing at the school system that could have helped me out, because there was no services there. And oftentimes I think about counselors and therapists, and yes, that's good, but guess what? They also need to find like, you know, theater, arts, free sports, you know, things that youth can definitely, you know, take their feelings out in different ways. It is not always going to be through therapy, you know, not always going to be through counseling. Sometimes it has to be like, hey, you want to get into sports, go run a mile and let's check in later. How are you doing? You know, like, hey, just let's express yourself through art, through theater. You know, I had the opportunity to do that as an adult, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. I wanted to do this when I was younger. You know, but it has definitely did affect my mom and her health, and it's definitely affected me in missing a lot of stuff, right? And having that sense, I feel now that I'm, you know, an adult, I feel like now that I do work a lot of work with youth, I feel like, man, it's not even hard to ask them a question of like, how's your day going? It's not hard to connect with their parents. It's not hard to like, hey, we need to talk, you know, what's going on? You know, also making sure that you're a mandated report and they understand that, you know, but it's just like, damn, that wasn't hard. Asking them that question. It's not hard sitting in círculo, you know, talk about conversations that affect us, things that affect us in our daily lives. Like, and these grown-ups couldn't do that. But all they could do is criminalize me and push me out of school because that was just an easy way out for them. Oh, we don't get to deal with you. Next, right? And I see that oftentimes they don't acknowledge us. They don't acknowledge the youth. They go on about their days without acknowledging the students that they have there, the youth that are incarcerated. But they do acknowledge when they see a number in the paper. They acknowledge that number. They acknowledge, oh, we have this many students and this is how much money we need. But they don't acknowledge you when they see you in person. But they do acknowledge a number. And for some reason, I think that's humane, a humane thing to do.
It impacted our family in every way you can potentially think of. Like, so first time being in trouble with the law is, I think it was like in 3rd or 4th grade. I might have got into like a fight, and I was being very after the fight, Mr. Jones, the principal, had me sitting down in his office, and I would have kept getting up and wanting to leave. And I was like kind of all hysterical, so he didn't know how to like deal with me. So I remember he called the cops, and the cops came in, tried to talk to me, and I was being all hysterical. So they put cuffs on until my grandma came. It was like in 3rd and 4th grade, and my grandma picked me up. And you know, as a kid, I was always in trouble. Like, I don't know if it was a troublemaker or just I don't know. Like I don't. That's the part where like I don't know if I just like doing some shit like that or I was really just acting out because of things that were happening in my life at the time. Um, so I was getting into fights, uh, up to like doing travesura, and you know I was getting suspended. So when I always got suspended or expelled, and you know it actually always impacted my mom. She had to miss work, and sometimes the reality was she ain't missing work. And she tell me next time que pasa esto, te las averiguas tú solo. And so my grandma, they would call my grandma when she still lived in Watsonville, and she'd come pick me up. Or one of my aunties, either my tia Nora or my tia Ophelia would come. And so and it's crazy because out of all my siblings, I was the one acting out the most. Like my brother and my sister had their roles of like, mom's not here, we gotta handle biz. My other sister really followed suit as to what my sister said. And for me, it's like I just didn't care. Like even you know, regardless of shit, mom knew how to deal with me in her way. And when I knew when she came back from work, it was bad. So figure it out, right? And but my actions really impacted all them and my mom as far as just like always having to like vas a estar como tu papá, you know, if I vas en el mismo camino, vas a andar como sus tíos, primos, you know, all that same like the health narrative, right? And but it took a toll on my mom because it's like I talked to my mom later and she would be like, man, I didn't know how I failed you. It's like no sabía qué hacer. Like I didn't know who to turn to, who to go to. Like no le podías a tus tíos que te vieran hablar porque andaban todos prendidos. They were all freaking strung out. Like we didn't know who to come talk to. You weren't listening to your older brother and no one. So it's like, so it really impacted everybody. And then once I started getting involved with law enforcement, I think my first time arrested, my brother, my older sister, like, I think they took it really hard because then it's like, oh, there he goes just like that. He's going to leave us too. And my mom was like, ahí va otro, right? Here goes another one. And not only did her partner get locked up, she's seen family members get locked up, right? Hermanas, hermanos, the whole works. And so the mental, physical aspect, it was real. You know, my mom, once I got locked up and I was sent away, she developed diabetes, high blood. And so physically it was real. And it really mattered. It really for all of us. Because they also, at the same time, once I got incarcerated, they kept it on the hush hush. Oh, don't talk about that. It's embarrassing. You know, and they didn't tell my grandma for years that I was locked up. I don't know, how the hell did you guys pull that one off? I was like, and a lot of my family members in Mexico didn't know. And once they knew, it was like kind of everybody was tripping. So it really took a toll on all of the mental, physical, and emotional. So the school to prison pipeline is real as far as what it does. Having to show up to courtrooms and my mom, I talked to her and she said like one of their biggest things was like she wanted to, I asked her, remember I was like hella mad. I was like, dude, why didn't you never said speak up for me in court? You know, why didn't you never say anything? And she sat there and she started sobbing. And I remember she said like, no tenía papeles. ¿Qué tal si me agarran a mí? I got your brothers and sisters, you know, to think about. I was like, oh, I never thought about that. You know, and navigating, and also, you know, for her as a mom, not knowing English and having to put up with either educators and all them of like talking down to her, like, dude, your kid's not doing his homework. What's wrong with you? Like, it was hard on her, and she knew like math wise, she got it down. Like different things, she had it down. Like, but English language and reading, like, so she was able to help and also not help, and then work all that. And again, like, you know, 7th grade, I still remember the vice principal at Hall Middle School, Miss Femister. I had got into a vicious fight in 7th grade, and I got expelled from that school, or from the school district. And she had me translate to my mom that if I continue on the same way, that by age 18 or by 18, I'd either be in prison or I'd be dead. And I turned around and I had to translate this for my mom, right? Mind you, I'm like, what, 12 years old at the time? And I told my mom, and my mom was like very surprised. She said, she just nodded her head and we walked out. She was very serious. And we got home, and I think she was in, honestly, like, hey, my mom believed in it. She was a faithful believer in the cinto, right? But this time around, she was like, This time around, she just kind of like thought about it, and she was like, she started really crying. Like, dude, why do you want to go over there with your dad and the whole works, right? So it really messed with her, messed with everyone. And then once I got incarcerated, and I think it was I was going in, I was getting charged as an adult, so I had to go through fitness hearings, and she didn't know what was happening, but I had the if I was gonna get charged as an adult, if that did happen, I was gonna be fighting a life case. And once she heard that, her son might not come back home ever, oh, fucking fucked her up. And I just think about, I even get all emotional too. But going back to it, like, it really impacted them hard. Everyone, all across the board, yeah, and like even today, like they're always hella like, it's crazy. Like I remember, they're always like not sure if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's like no, como que todavía no, la confianza is not all there. So it's like, ¿qué estás haciendo? ¿Dónde vas? It's like, dude, I don't even live with you guys no more. And it's like, and they're always like on it, but it's like that pendiente, that pendiente that they have, of like when I would not come home, or like, is he locked up? So I really like this whole school to prison pipeline, going to freaking expulsion meetings, suspension meetings, be belittled by your teachers, or when she would go for like a parent teacher conference, and I don't know what they call, yard duty or securities were there. And like I always had a bad rapport with all of them. So they'd be like, oh, tú eres la mamá de Edgar, get on it, ¿qué están haciendo? Like, and they're like basically question her parenting skills. So it's like, as a mom, like, fuck, like, and all these things, it's crazy because I talked about my mom about this, and I'm just hearing her, like, all her stuff, like, that I didn't know, that I didn't think of. Really, everything impacted. And my sisters, like, they navigated with it. My sister, she's a year older than me. So I went to high school with her. Like, I didn't go to high school with her, but we were supposed to be in high school. Everybody would ask me, like, what happened to your brother? Where's your brother at? It's like, oh, my brother's fucking gone. Like, she would say Mexico, or he's somewhere with some relatives. And next thing you know, the word got out, like, that's fucking, he's not coming home for a long time. And it's like, so it impacted them. My brother, as an older brother, he felt, and talking to him, he failed. He didn't do his part as the man of the house, being the oldest person. And so he became very introverted, knowing that he experienced my father's incarceration, or being poor, las caras, by the family, todo eso. And then my issues, he really internalized that and started drinking, alcohol was like, and he never drank or none of that when he was young, ya de adulto, right? It's crazy, all those things are just like, I trip out. And but yeah, I'll say that much.
Is there anything else you would like to add, as to the other outcomes?
We don't come from like we don't have to keep punishing our youth. If that's the thing to do, then we're still living in the 1800s, where we are punish children for making mistakes. And I hear too, well, they're making adult decisions. Well, guess what? Our brain is not fully developed to the age of 25. If you tell me something that you did as a youth that you regret now, what would that be? Or that you will make different, what would that be? Will you make the choice again? Would you? If you would, there's something you need to work on. But I'm pretty sure half the time it's something that you wouldn't do again. So it affects us emotional, spiritual, physically. It affects us in so many different ways that we're still trying to figure out how, right? It's definitely affected the relationship that I had with my mom, for a while, where the system made a good job at feeling like disconnecting as a relationship that we had, right? For a while, I was like, was it really your fault that I went through that? Was it really your fault that I went through this? Like, where were you at? Why didn't you, And it's just like, I came to the realization, you know what? My mom tried. She had to put roof over my head. She had to feed me. She had to clothe me. And the little attention she could give me, she would give it to me. If my mom is bien amorosa, in her own way. But it's, she tried. So it wasn't her fault. And it, like I said, it did affect us in our relationship. But this go to prison pipeline affects people in many different ways. And it gets to you many different ways. Some people end up all the way to prison. Luckily, I only ended up to juvenile hall in the foster care system, which wasn't even that lucky, because I never lived with my mom ever since the age of 16. And yeah, I never really had a home till now.
Is there any other long-term effects it had? Did it affect your any job opportunities that were brought your way, or the way society looked at you? Did you receive any records because of your incarceration?
So yes, like I had mentioned before, I am a formerly incarcerated person. I currently carry the title of a felon because the things that I was charged with were felonies. Um, so I believe, yes, it did alter the way society looked at me. Um, I'm kind of looked, and in the eyes of some people, I am looked at as a criminal. I am looked at as, a troublemaker. Still to this day, I carry that with me from my youth to my adulthood. That title of like troubled person, felon, criminal, angry person, what have you, to a certain demographic of people. But um, well, also actually, it did affect my possibility for housing. So I have lost housing opportunities for the fact that I do carry a criminal record, a felony record. Um, so I've lost opportunities for housing. I've lost opportunities for work as well. I'm blessed to currently work at MILPA, where this record that I have is kind of like, it's almost like a requirement to be a formerly incarcerated person, because I have this experience and I'm able to let folks know, like, hey, these are the things that people like myself have to go through on a regular basis, which is, you know, you can't find a job, you can't find good housing, you are essentially shunned in a way from certain groups and certain demographics of folk. I feel like I'm the kind of person that I want to help people like myself. Um, and within these systems, it's really hard, especially with the record, to be able to be cleared, to be able to go into certain spaces and be like, hey, like, I just want to help folks, like, however it is, whether it's providing a service or just, being a mentor. I have that opportunity now thanks to MILPA, but I feel like if MILPA was not around, I would definitely still be struggling to find employment. I would definitely still be struggling to find housing. But I'm blessed to have this opportunity to work here and do what I do. If it wasn't for MILPA, I probably would still be struggling to this day, still trying to find programs that would accept me with my criminal record, still trying to navigate these really complicated systems, um, and try to find my way out, which at this point, I mean, there's still, for myself, I feel like there's still no way out, because there's still a lot of these, yes, it's the system itself that just makes it really hard for people like me to get out. Once you're in, you're in. I was pretty much in as a youth, and I'm still navigating to this day, trying to find my way out.
Yeah, gracias for that question right there. Yeah, so I think understand. So I'm gonna start with like my daughters, right? It created a. There was a time where me and their mother, and mostly because the behaviors that I was engaging in, um, I think I zoned out and shut off, right? And I mean, we were both kids, and it being easy for me because the mother has a very big responsibility for the mother. It's like, and for the father también. But at that time, like it was easy for me to, like, I didn't have no comprehension of the responsibility and the magnitude that I was involved in. It was easy to leave. Um, so I ended up because of this trajectory that I was in, and there was no positive intervention, right? Um, it really one, it like it separated me from my daughters, right, and their mother, you know, which by the way, I just want to say she did a great job, you know, throughout this whole time raising them, you know, and she was able to navigate my like my circumstances well enough to where I would, yeah. So kudos to her for sure. But yeah, I mean, getting involved, you know, in the system and going through this whole pipeline. Um, I mean, you end up with a record, you know, you end up documented, you know, and whenever we get pulled over, you know, now you're getting profiled, you know, now I'm getting, you know, they're getting to know my name, who I am. So anytime they see me, you know, they're getting pulled over. So all this is just piling up against me. Eventually, you know, getting out from on probation and or parole. Um, it's you know, I think the one of the biggest consequences and punishment is it's not really being locked up or going into prison or jail. It's actually having to live in this country, in our community, right, with the record. You know, once that happens, like I was redlined. You know, I couldn't. You know, it's if we try to look for jobs, you know, there was certain jobs that, yeah, they were considered second chance, right? With, you know, they consider they hired felons, right? But there was like crappy jobs or and I say crappy because it's like you're like surveillance the whole time you're there. You feel uncomfortable. You know, they make you feel like a criminal basically, or like a freaking bad person, or like you're gonna, you know, steal or something. Like, so it's a very toxic environment, you know, and just like, man, you're just like, man, forget this, you know. I'm gonna go back to what to do best, you know, make fast money or something. Um, so, you know, yeah, obviously job opportunities were not there. At least nothing that didn't involve hard labor, you know. Because I mean, we always have the option, right, to go to the fields and stuff and do that type of work, which is really, you know, I really have much respect, you know, and admiration for the folks that continue to work the land in that way, you know, because that's where my family también, ahí estado también, my whole family too, not just my parents, my immediate one, but like the kind of, I don't have a big family, but the ones that were there también, that's all they done, you know. So, and then, but on top of that too, within our society, you know, being stigmatized, you know, being, you know, targeted by law enforcement, even having that like the como dicen, you know, that mal de ojo from our own community, right, from our own like neighbors and stuff, you know, oh, viene ese cholo, or telling them, or because I had some friends, you know, and they were telling me, like, we would just talk, and like they would come over to my house, right? My mom's always been like, she's been amable, you know, she just loves everybody. So it's like, you got your friends that come over and like, yeah, she's gonna feed us and stuff like that, and accepts everybody, you know. But when we would try to go over to, when I try to go over to some of their houses, it'd be like, oh no, I can't go, you know, my parents said that I shouldn't be hanging out with you and stuff like that. So it really, it really, I think some of those are like those long-term effects. It's like feel unwanted, or you feel like, you know, you internalize what you're feeling, seeing, right, hearing, all that stuff, and you just like kind of just, as you're just running with it, you know. It's like really arrested development, like an emotional arrested development, you know. And I didn't have the proper coping skills, opportunities, mentorship, to really understand what the effects that my life was gonna have because of my behaviors, you know. So and again, I mean, you know, everybody's experience in life and circumstances is a little bit different, but I think the system itself treats everybody the same, you know. I mean, at least people of color, of course, you know, because the system is racist. Um, pero yeah, those long-term effects was really, it really evolves from that physical and that mental into the emotional, and then eventually like spiritual también, you know, you're like just walking out here like a zombie, you know, just not really understanding our full potential. You know, it's like, hey, we're actually good, cool people. You know, we actually can have fun. We actually can have a good conversation. We actually can have diplomacy and like, and como dicen, you know, hablando se arreglan las cosas. You know, we can actually like, we don't have to get into a fire. We don't, you know, it's like, and that's okay. I don't have to take it that way. You know, it's like constructive criticism is fine. You know, and it just even making friends. You know, it's like even having healthy relationships with folks. You know, it's like that's something that was taken away from me for a very long time. You know, just being hyper vigilant también in regards to uh, people's conversations or tones of voice and stuff like that. Just it was a really toxic place and environment that I was in. You know, or that I created for myself. Maybe, you know. When I don't even want to say I created myself, but that it's a byproduct from from these failed from the failed school system, you know.
Now that we've talked about the school to prison pipeline and how it affected you, and you know, it affected your family as well, is there something that you think we could do to dismantle the school to prison pipeline?
I think first and foremost, getting rid of that punitive mindset. Kids do not need to be punished. They need to be guided. They need mentors. They need access to resources. So mental health services, I think, is one of the really most prominent things that need to change, is just more access to mental health, more access to resources. Figure out what is really troubling that youth. Do they suffer with mental health? Do they have something going on in their house? Are they, living in poverty? A lot of these things factor into why youth act out. So instead of saying, hey, we need to punish these, troublemakers, no, they're not troublemakers. They're youth that could potentially be in crisis or suffer with mental illness. So I think that's one surefire way to at least start to address these issues within the school to prison pipeline, is just treat youth as what they are. Don't label them as, a troublemaker. They're a person and they most likely are going through something. So just figure out, like, what is that? Don't punish them, help them.
Surgeon that went and spoke at the city council district a few years back. And he's like, you know what? When we are around kids, we, wear different uniforms. We wear like little, things that have cartoons on it. But we're working, when you get ready for surgery, we have our suits, our uniforms specifically for surgery, because we understand that children they think that we're scary when we come out with their surgeon uniform. And so is there a way that we can compromise your uniform, so children could feel a little safer? The chief went up there and was like, nope, I'm not going to compromise. They are my officers. That's not going to happen. We're just like, what? Like, the community's trying to compromise here with you and you're not going to compromise? And there was another incident that happened too, where this police officer went up there and she was just like, this kid had scissors, and, when I walked in, we were about to shoot him. She had like this whole good story. He was like, yeah, like, she had a good relationship with this youth. And then she's like, once I walked in, we're about to shoot him. And everybody was like, oh, like, you were going to shoot a kid that's going through the situation. You're not trained. They're not trained for de-escalating mental health. And if they are, that's not their profession. That's what there's mental health specialists and there's mental health workers and mental health assistants and people that actually went to school for this, not people that are used to criminalize and arrest and serve and protect our community, quote unquote, on that. So that's what I'm saying. It's just like, we don't need that. We need to think beyond punitive measures that we've had in practice for so many years. We are in 2021, and we need to think beyond that. We need to think like, what are the root causes of this? not the symptoms of the way that our youth are reacting to it. And we automatically blame the parents. Well, how about the parents are working full time? What then? How are you gonna blame them? What can the school system do better? What can our teachers do better? We're also coming from a COVID, from a pandemic, a global pandemic that we're still struggling to get through. Are the teachers and the counselors there trained to accept these children back into campuses when these children just went through a pandemic, where they had to isolate themselves, where their parents probably lost their jobs, where, it brought stress to the home, and who knows if they had to be with their abusers behind closed doors. And who knows if, probably one of their family members died due to COVID, or a few of them died due to COVID. Or now they're being displaced from their home because they can't afford rent due to COVID, the loss of jobs. Now this children lost a whole year of socializing, of being around other peers. So now they're coming back to our schools, and guess what's gonna happen? A lot of suspensions are gonna happen, and it's sad, because we also have to understand, like, to what level are we ready to support this youth? As adults, as people that are trained. One of the meetings that I went to yesterday as well, they said that they only have one therapist and one counselor and one social worker in their schools out of 1,000 students. That's not enough. That's not enough. The support needs to go beyond students. It also has to go to community, has to go to their parents, not even their parents, whoever their legal guardians are. And how can we best support them, in order for them to strive and think beyond youth incarceration? In order for all those youth that we've lost in the hands of law enforcement and incarceration, that we need to make something different. Because we don't have metal detectors in an all-white school here locally. Majority of the metal detectors in school resource officers that there's majority in schools that are predominant kids of color. So that just tells you how much institutional racism goes to, and how it's clearly in our view. So what I am asking for folks is to think beyond punitive measures. Start looking into what we need to do and what the school systems can do. Educate yourself on school resource officers and mass incarceration and the school to prison pipeline. Watch some videos. There's some videos on YouTube. We don't have to wait for it to be our children to go through this.
A lot of people are going to benefit from hearing your story and the story of others that have been affected. So again, thank you so much for sharing and being open to participate in this project.